Hi, I'm Rachel Lancaster, and this is the Magnificent Midlife Podcast. This is where we celebrate women in midlife and beyond. We challenge the status quo and bash those negative stereotypes about being an older woman. We're not over the hill at 40, 50, 60. We're just getting started, and the world needs us now more than ever. I'll be talking all things midlife and sharing some fabulous stories of amazing women doing very cool stuff. Now's our time. For the first time ever, I have two guests today, and they are Julia Frey and Sarah Auerswald, who are the co-hosts of the very wonderful Menopodcast. And I came across this podcast when I was scouting around, seeing who else was in my world, and got hooked very quickly and sort of binge listened to a few episodes. So it's lovely to have you here, ladies. Thank you very much. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks
Happy
for having
to
us.
be here. Yeah.
So my first question to you is, what is your mission?
Oh boy, mission driven.
Mission driven. Well, our main mission is to talk about menopause as regular women going through menopause, because we felt like we didn't hear those voices. And we thought, okay, we're not doctors, which
Right.
we say over and over on our podcast.
Say that now, just to get that out of the way.
Yeah, we're just two modern moms and just dealing with it, and thought, why don't we get together and learn more about what we're going through, and then be a voice or two voices for regular women, you know, who just don't know what's happening, and we're figuring it out as we go and sharing what we've learned.
Yeah, I think we wanted to be, a source for some people who, like us, weren't finding information just sort of generally around, or their doctors weren't telling them. Part of what we found too is that we're moms with kids at home still. So for us, you imagine menopause begins in the golden years, your empty nest, and
and all the rose petals and the gauzy images of later in life. And,
right.
And we're like, that's not us.
Well, that's not us. And that's a lot of people we know who had children later in life. And so, anyway, so we wanted to be this source and resource. And so we decided we would start reading these books and doing some research and then tell everybody that we knew. So that's where it started.
That's our mission. Yep.
And how did you come to decide to do a podcast in order to get this information across?
Well, both of us are pretty well versed in online worlds.
Yeah.
Sarah has a very successful mom's blog. And I've been a blogger for a long time as well. And, we're up on social media, blah, blah, blah. So, and we've also listened to a lot of podcasts. So we were very into the whole podcast world. And then we were having breakfast one day, just as friends, because we've known each other since we were kids. And so we're just chit-chatting about, what are you going through? Oh, I'm going on hormone replacement therapy because we just started talking about menopause and menopause symptoms and life and midlife. And we just talked about it. And then we said goodbye. And then I was driving around running errands, and it popped into my head, oh my God, we should have a podcast, and we should call it Menopodcast. And then I got on the phone.
She screamed over, pulled over the car, bought the domain right then.
Well, not quite. Luckily, I was 5 minutes away from home. But like in my 5 minutes racing home, I'm calling Sarah, and she's in a meeting. She's not answering. And I'm like, Sarah, answer the phone. We got to do a podcast. It's going to be called Menopodcast.
Well, so my joke maybe, 10 years ago was somebody would have an idea and I'd say, oh, start a blog. And then, it changed like, oh, start a podcast.
Now do a podcast.
You should start a podcast.
Exactly.
And didn't the New York Times just say we've reached peak podcast?
Peak podcast,
so,
yeah.
It's the thing. It's the podcasts are the thing.
Right. But then it was like, yeah, why not? Let's figure it out. So that's how we came about it.
Well, I think you were definitely ahead of the curve, and I don't agree with the New York Times. I think, yes, there is a sense that everybody's got a podcast now, but then again, apparently the BBC has got a new focus on podcasts and is
all right,
reworking the way they do their audio content. So
yeah,
there's room for us all, isn't there?
Yes, there is for sure.
Yes. It's just then it's like then you're in the sea of, even if it's near peak podcast, how do you get found, right? Like how do you get people to listen and find you? So I think there's still that issue, but
yeah, what I do love about Menopodcast is, as you can hear from just listening to these two lovely ladies, it's very funny and very straightforward, and it's very honest. And I really love that.
Well, thank you.
I just have to say, sorry, I'm just going to say, if you ever get a chance to be interviewed by Rachel, please do, because she is so complimentary. I just want to take those little snippets and listen to them in the morning when I'm not feeling good yet. Oh, Thank you, Rachel.
Thank you.
Oh, I'll try to lace a few through as we go through. How did your family and friends react when you said, we're going to do a podcast and it's going to be about menopause?
Well, so my kids are teenagers, so, still at home, but not empty nest, but anyways, teenage boys. And so I said, yeah, so we're going to do this podcast with, Auntie Nini, which is what we call Julia in our family. And they said, oh, menopause. Huh. So yeah, end of an era, huh, Mom?
Oh.
I was like, well, you're the era that we're talking about. So I guess we're not quite done. But yeah, my kids are known for like these one-liners that just, slay ya. But anyway, and my husband is kind of like, now what's a podcast again? Yeah. So he's like, oh, that's great. Have a good time. See you later.
Yeah, my husband was similar. He's like, okay. Yeah. And then my daughter was 5 at the time, so
not a registering. But our female friends who are of a similar age are very interested. They don't all listen. I know they're not all subscribers because I can tell, but they're very interested.
Yeah.
Or they're a few years younger and they're in complete denial and say things like, I'm nowhere near. Thanks for telling me. I don't want to be associated with this. Right. I'm like, you're closer than you think.
Right.
And we'll be here when you need us.
Right. The friends who I told were supportive and like, oh, that's interesting. Like, and maybe some weren't willing to chat, but they were supportive, of course. But I think what's most surprising is the way I talked about it, and this is sort of like how I feel about menopause, people talking about menopause in general, which is, I would say, oh, I have a podcast. And they go, what's it about? And I go, menopause. Like, it was hard to just go, menopause.
Right.
And now 2 years later, I'm like, menopause. Let's talk about menopause. But so the first couple times it was like, oh, I'm really excited. I have a podcast. And it's about menopause.
Yeah.
Yeah. But mostly I would say that to women. And there were a lot of times when women who I thought I would say, oh, but it probably doesn't apply to you. And I'd say it's about menopause. And they go, oh, no, I'm kind of interested in that. I had a couple women say that, like sort of people that I worked with. Mm-hmm. And so that was nice. And then they were like, and then I would see them later and like, I listened to your podcast. It was really interesting. I'm like, oh, good. That's nice. So.
And then I also had the friends who are older who've already been through menopause. The reaction was, oh, thank God that's over. I don't want to talk about it anymore. Like they were done.
and done.
It was like, never look back.
But yeah, generally supportive. And then half the time people are like, I'd love to listen. How do you do it?
Yeah. What's a podcast?
How do you make it? How do I get it?
So in that way, I think that the New York Times is also wrong. It's not, we may have reached peak production. We certainly aren't at peak listening.
Right.
I agree. There's lots of people in my world who have never listened to a podcast. I asked somebody to be on my podcast the other day, and she said, "Well, I've never listened to one, so I'm going on holiday, and I'll go and listen to some of your podcasts." It's like, okay. And my mum still doesn't understand what that I'm doing. She doesn't. Yeah. I keep saying, there's like a radio show, but. Yeah. It's not on the radio, but it's just the same, really. It's not that different in terms of concept, but she doesn't really get it. Yeah.
Yeah. My aunt and uncle, same thing, because we have the NPR instead of the BBC. And so you hear like all these shows on the radio that also have podcast versions. And so they're like, but why would you need a podcast? Why don't they just stay on the radio? So it's very funny trying to explain it. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's like Netflix and terrestrial telly, isn't it? Really?
Yeah.
Netflix, you can go and choose what you want when you want it.
Exactly.
And you can't do that with terrestrial telly. It's on, isn't it? That's it. You're stuck with it.
You're stuck. Exactly.
You're stuck watching whatever they want you to watch. Yeah. So I know you two have known each other for a very long time, and I'm very interested to learn that you grew up on Maui. So tell me a little bit about growing up on Maui.
Oh,
it's paradise.
Can you hear the whispering winds and the hula hands? It was paradise. It was absolutely paradise. It was this. Well, I moved there in the 70s, not of my own volition. I was a child, of course. But didn't wear shoes for much of my life. We didn't lock the doors. You didn't need to. We went to the beach all the time.
Right.
You lived near the beach.
I lived basically at
the beach.
I mean, when people say what's it like growing up there, I usually say it's like growing up in a in a small town in the country.
Yeah, rural.
It's very rural, but it's also Hawaii, so it's tropical and amazing, right. And the water's always warm. And I'm so spoiled by the warm water. Even after living in Los Angeles for 34 years, people go, "Oh, the water's so warm at the beach in LA. Let's go swimming." I'm like, no, it's freezing cold. It's freezing.
Yeah.
But it was basically a small rural town.
Yeah. And it was the 70s. Let's not forget. So everything was a little bit slower and smaller in the 70s everywhere, of course. But, Maui was especially so. We got a newspaper 3 days a week. You could not get the New York Times unless someone flew in from New York to visit you and brought it with them. And then it was like, my parents were very excited about it. We got our television shows tape delay. There wasn't a satellite up there doing this stuff yet. So we've always got the Christmas special would be the week after Christmas. That kind of thing.
Yeah. I don't think we got cable TV until the late 80s or.
Oh, yeah, no. And so Hana, which is this very idyllic idyllic space. This is this idyllic little part on the other side of the island. And they didn't have television at all until I was in high school. And so their soccer team would always demolish us, football in your world, it's football. But we had soccer.
We understand soccer. We can work with soccer. I know to call it.
You have experienced the American word, but anyway, so they would kill us. All of their teams were so much better than us because they had nothing else to do but practice. And the year they got television was the year we had a chance to beat them. It was phenomenal. We're like, oh my God, they got television. We can win.
That's hilarious. Yeah, it was very behind the times.
Yeah.
We had 2 AM radio stations that had the pop music on it in the 70s and the 80s. And then, you could get the FM station, but only if you lived up country, which is up the mountain at altitude. Yeah. So you could get the beam from the other island. So you could, and then sometimes it would come in and out.
Yeah.
And so they'd be like, "Oh, I can finally hear the station." Oh, it's gone now.
Yeah. We learned to dance hula. We knew how to make leis.
I never learned how to dance.
Okay, well,
what's a lei?
What's the lei? The flower necklace. Yes.
Mm-hmm. I did learn how to make lei.
Okay. We knew, we ate. So my father had grown up in the Midwest, and then we moved there, and then he never got to eat potatoes again because you would eat rice with every meal. Right. It was just there was always rice being made in the house. And you would have rice with every meal. Right, and it was just normal.
Yeah.
That was our normal.
Right. So it was small town rural, but also incredibly multicultural, which was amazing. So you got to eat Filipino food and Vietnamese food and Thai food and Japanese food and Chinese food and Hawaiian food. And it was great.
Yeah.
And some American food.
Yeah, not much. Hamburgers. But mostly. It was a really weird meal. Every once in a while, my dad would want steak and potatoes, and it was so strange.
It's what are we having? Yeah. Yeah. So, so we learned, nice. So we learned to eat just really amazing different kinds of foods.
And we had what people now call casual Fridays. So we had Aloha Fridays.
And they still do.
They still do. Oh, nice. And so that was, so my dad would wear an Aloha shirt to school or to work, and we would wear, so a Hawaiian dress for girls is called a muumuu.
A muumuu.
Wow. But everybody said muumuu.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah,
it was wonderful.
It was wonderful.
And it's still pretty wonderful, but it's more crowded now and,
even more expensive. Well, that was the other thing too. It's a very expensive place to live because they had to ship everything in. I mean, even milk was expensive.
Yeah. Well, there was a dairy on the island.
Right.
So I don't know why milk was expensive.
Yeah.
But
small production or something.
Maybe.
Yeah, we drank powdered milk for a while.
Oh, yeah.
Just because milk was so expensive.
Sure.
Yeah. In my great-grandmother's sterling silver vase. Pitcher.
Oh my God, how funny.
It's hilarious.
Well, if you're gonna up-level your powdered milk.
Up-level your powdered milk.
Yeah.
Great-grandma's silver pitcher.
So then you moved to Los Angeles.
Yes, skipped a couple of years, the boring years, and let's cut to, yes, we both ended up here to work in the movie industry.
Yep. Yeah.
So that was
going
to be my next question. Yeah. So what did you do or do you do now as well as doing Menopodcast?
Well, I'm in a magnificent midlife reinvention currently.
Yay.
But my
notice how she worked that in.
Smooth. My career has been in the film business as a visual effects producer. So I produce visual effects for feature films.
Big movies. Why don't you name a couple?
Contact. Recently, Jumanji.
Wow.
I don't know what else have I worked on.
Black 15, whatever that was.
Okay, skip that one.
It's a credit.
But I worked on a lot of smaller movies like Walk the Line and Memoirs of a Geisha, and I worked on the original pilot for Game of Thrones. Original pilot.
Right.
Yeah. So anyway.
The big stuff. She worked on big stuff. I came out here working first as a script supervisor on little independent movies, and got then into television here because it was you'd get a lot of work. It was like a full season of a TV show was like almost 9 months. Yeah, so it was really good for buying a house, which is what I did.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that was the nice thing about visual effects I didn't even realize was the similar thing is that a lot of times when people work just on the set on a movie as a grip or electrical or even script supervisor, you work for that 2 or 3 or 4 months and then you're done. You have to find another job. But visual effects and TV are nice because in visual effects, you start in pre-production and you work all the way through to the movie's release. So that could be a year or 2 years. And I realized later that's great because then you don't have to just keep looking for work as often. So that was a big bonus for visual effects.
And then Sarah, you also have you have a blog, don't you?
Yeah. Oh, yes. I stopped working those kind of jobs when I had my children because the hours are crazy on, production. And so, I couldn't do both. And it was time for a change. So, so once I had kids, then I needed to figure out something else to do. And I wanted to be really, well, first I thought I wanted to be creative. I tried a couple of different, like manufacturing job, like I invented, some diaper bags and some things like that. And I was trying to manufacture them, but it was just too much stuff. I didn't want to get into that. So I wanted a job or a business where I could be as mobile as possible. So once upon a time, you actually had to have a computer. Now, you can do a lot of things on this. And so it's, it's just on my phone. Yes. So it's very, I want it to be as low overhead as possible. And so I got into websites and blogging, and it's great. I mean, you just need a Wi-Fi connection and either a laptop or a really good phone, and you can do a lot.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And now a microphone.
So Julia, where are you going now, having done your special effects? You said you were reinventing yourself.
I have been writing for the past, I used to work for a company, a visual effects company, but I left there in 2000. And so for the last 19 years, I have been freelancing in visual effects. And in between jobs, I would always say to people, I never buy things like shoes or cars or, like I don't spend money that way. I buy time. So I would buy time between projects. And in that time, I would write. And so I've been writing. I've written a few scripts. And so I want to really refocus on that and get that and be more serious about it in terms of not just writing something, but then also getting it out in the world and selling it or getting an agent or getting a manager.
Brilliant.
So that it's, so that, and then also just fun little side projects like a podcast or like something that comes up and I think, oh, that'd be fun. Let me just investigate that for a bit and just try it. And then also I have a 7-year-old daughter, and so I love
that's a full-time job.
That's a full-time job. But I love being home and picking her up from school and really being involved in her life because she's our one and only, and I just get this one shot. So it's really, one of my biggest goals in life was to always, or as often as possible, sit down for a family dinner. And so even if it's just the three of us, but we sit down to dinner just about every night. And I love that. And it makes me so happy. So
well done, you. I can never get any of my children to sit down and have a meal with me.
Oh. Well, they're a bit bigger now, I think. So it's easier to get the 7-year-old to the table.
I suppose so, yeah. So going back to the podcast, what's the most surprising thing that you've learned about menopause since starting it?
Well, so technically that you never are unmenopausal, that apparently according to the medical community, once you've gone through menopause, I mean, like you're always called a menopausal woman. It's not like a thing that you go through and you're done. And I thought, that sucks. I don't want to be called that for the rest of my life. So that was interesting. I thought that was surprising. What about you?
I think that there was there was so much more to perimenopause. I didn't know much about perimenopause. I felt like menopause was like, well, you're done. You finish your period, you're over. That's right. It. But that there's also so much more to it in terms of how the estrogen being reduced really affects a lot of different parts of your body, and how important it is to stay even healthier than you thought you need to.
Yeah.
And also in our research, we learned that heart problems are the number one killer of women.
Yeah.
That was the most surprising thing.
Oh, that is surprising.
Not directly menopause related, but just age related.
Very surprising.
But is that in the States or globally?
I guess you could probably say states as the safest way to say that. But yeah, they say it. I mean, they never preface it with whichever country, but they say that heart disease is the number one killer of women beyond all cancers combined.
Wow.
Yeah. So that was a good wake up call for.
I think healthy. Just kind of overall, you think, okay, so when we all get our period at some point, all women, and at some point, like the switch is flipped, whatever, and you have your period, and you're a fertile woman at that point. And then I assumed it was just the opposite at menopause, like, oh, it's done. But it's so different for every single woman. Everyone goes through it differently, and I think that was surprising. I just assumed it would be just the same as getting your period and stopping your period. No, it's not.
Yeah. I just assumed I'd be having hot flashes all the time. Excuse me. And both of us.
But then you get to a point and be like, done. I'm done. Everybody's done. That's how it works. No, everybody works differently. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. So
I think that's interesting that you talk about us being menopausal forever, because over here we talk about post-menopause. I mean, I'm post-menopause.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say I'm menopausal I'm a menopausal woman, although medically I think possibly that might be the case. But I talk about being post-menopause. But I think it's very interesting that actually, because I think a lot of women assume that all of the things that they put in place to get them through menopause, then they can do away with them. Whereas actually, I always say, we've talked about this, haven't we, that you sort of set yourself up now during menopause, you invest in your health now, so that you can be healthy long term. And all of the things that I'm trying to do to balance my hormones naturally, I'm going to carry on doing them forever. I'm never going to stop having my soy milk and my flax seeds, because I just think they're really good for me. So I'm just not going to stop.
Right.
Yeah, we agree. As I put hemp seed on my yogurt this morning.
Me too. Yeah, me too. I heard about the hemp seed oil on your podcast. Yeah, but then I realized I was actually already having the actual hemp seeds. So I thought, oh, I'm all right then. I can tick that box.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So what do you wish more women knew about menopause that generally they don't?
That it starts earlier than you think with perimenopause.
Yeah, I wish, yes. And also, so these changes that are happening to you that, you don't even want to maybe notice, but they're subtle, and, oh, suddenly I'm drier skin, or I'm feeling more anxious, or I'm not sleeping. Well, those things are probably perimenopause. Maybe you should think about that option. I think it's that I wish people didn't think of it as a death sentence, because I think we do, in at least America.
Here as well.
Yeah. But
End of an era.
End of an era.
Mm-hmm. End of life. I mean, we might as well just sit in the corner and die, quite frankly, mightn't we?
Right.
There's no life for us.
No life afterwards. Can you imagine? No, I can't imagine.
Can't imagine.
So, yeah. But I think, I wish they didn't think that.
Yeah. The negative stereotype. Absolutely. Yeah. But I also, one other thing I wish is that, that doctors were better prepared to talk to their patients about perimenopause and menopause. Even just as hey, keep these things in mind, as you're entering your 40s. And I think we talked about this last time when we talked to you about it's an interesting time in the world because women are still trying to have kids in their 40s, some even into their 50s. And so there's still so much focus on having babies versus, but at the same time, you're probably going through perimenopause and menopause. And so please pay attention to that. Please learn more about that so you can be healthy and really treat symptoms that come up.
I think it depends on your doctor, because as I've said, my gynecologist is extremely focused on midlife women.
That's great.
So I think you just have to sort of find someone, although he's an OB as well. And so, you're sitting in the room, the waiting room, there's pregnant women too. But I think, you just have to find the right doctor, which is always hard, and you have to be able to afford it. It's not always on the plan, but it's worth trying to find the right doctor.
For sure. Yeah. Especially if you're having we talked about hot flashes in their season 5, and
season
hot
5.
Flashes season 5.
Just let me interject there. Did you hear that, listeners? Season 5.
Good grief.
That is
talk about an era.
Incredible. There's no end of this era, clearly.
It goes on and on.
You're going to go.
Season 5. But just that hot flashes can be debilitating for some women, and we shouldn't laugh it off as like, oh, you're just in menopause, you're having a hot flash. I mean, it can cause terrible sleep disorders and depression because you just can't get a handle on how you're feeling, and how it could be shameful if you're at work. It could be embarrassing. It can't, so anyway, so all those kinds of things, I wish that people took a bit more seriously than they culturally, it's just sort of a joke.
Yeah. And two, I think it, as I think and as you've talked about with your guests all the time on their show, it's an opportunity for this reflection and, and as Sandra Singh Low has said, the veil is off. The fertility veil is done. Now what, right? Like, how did I get here? What am I doing? What do I want to do? It's such an opportunity to do that, as opposed to, but I think it can hit you like a ton of bricks, because you can also say, I didn't want to be here. What am I doing? I'm stuck, and you can unstuck yourself if you want to.
I'm living proof of that, because if you listen to our first season, I was pissed. I was so mad. And this was 2 years ago. So I was in that first year of not having my period. So it wasn't technically in menopause, because menopause is technically a year, or some say 2 years without your period. I read somewhere else, and now they say 2 years.
It's over here it's 2 if you're under 50 and 1 if you're over 50.
Got it. Yeah. Okay. Right. So 2 years ago, I was like, this is hard. This is weird. I'm not a young, sexy woman anymore. I'm now middle-aged, and I don't look the same, and I don't feel the same, and I don't know what to do with all this. And I had mood swings. I've had gray hair for a while, but like this gray hair, this has been around for like 20 years. Anyway,
it's not gray, just for the record. No, for those of you not,
right here. Look at this right here.
I don't know. Could you? Rachel, you can see the difference between our heads. I just want to,
okay. I will take a picture and put it on our website.
Good, because you're going to have to, because you cannot see it with the naked eye.
Right. The point is, 2 years ago.
I've got some white ones in here too, in my fridge, if you look.
Yeah, again, get me a microscope and I'll be happy to look at them.
Exactly. Anyway, but yeah, so I went through all that 2 years ago, and I feel like doing the podcast and talking about it, and then just growing in 2 years. I feel so much better, and there's still days when it's like, oh, I'm not going to have any more babies, and I'm not 25 anymore, and like,
oh my God, I don't want to have a baby. It's the last thing I want to do.
But it's not. No, it's just the idea of like, this is no longer available to me.
Yeah,
this is done. And so that was a big change for me, because you were happy to be done, and I was always like, well, we had one and maybe we'll have another, and then we didn't, and then I'm done.
Yeah.
So,
no, I mean, don't get me wrong. There's like, it's no fun to feel old.
Yeah. But also just that letting go of the veil and all of that. There's good things about it. I don't miss my period at all. Let me just say, happy to not have a period for 3 years. But yeah, it was a really tough year. That first year was really tough. And now I'm growing and moving on and getting more excited about not having to have a tampon in my purse. In fact, I see them in bathrooms. I'm like, oh yeah, I remember those. Oh, that's funny.
Yeah. But that's why I think it's so important that we talk about it, like we're doing, because, and it's not just for the women in menopause, it's for the women coming up, because part of what I'm doing is I don't want anybody to fear menopause. I really and I want women to actually look forward to being older, look forward to being off the roller coaster, the estrogen roller coaster, and as you said, it's a fantastic opportunity this time of life to actually reassess and think, okay, what am I going to do now? What am I going to do next? So having these conversations is so powerful. So good.
Did you watch Fleabag?
Yes.
And so that scene with Kristen Scott Thomas in the second season, that 3-5 minute scene of her talking about being in menopause or being a menopausal woman was just fantastic. And like, every woman should watch that when they're 40 and 41 and 42. And just so they know, like, this is what it can be. This is how it can be.
Yeah.
That was great. So
I'm sorry. I feel like people don't want to know that, especially women in their 40s. I don't think they want to know until they need to know. So I think that, your show will be here as a resource for them, hopefully ours as well, but when they're ready. Because I don't think people go, let me plan for my retirement. Let me plan for my golden years. They don't think about it. We don't even save money for it, much less think about it generally. I don't know. I don't think so. So I think I love that we want it to be there, but I think it's only going to be there when they're ready.
Mm-hmm. But that's an interesting thing to do, is like, say, you're not ready for this, but in the future you might be. Here, just read this quick pamphlet, or let me just tell you some things to look out for. Like, you can couch it that way as a doctor or a healthcare professional. So it doesn't have to be like, you're going to have this, be ready for it. It's more like, there's just something to consider, because it's going to happen eventually. Preparing, like, I'm trying to come up with a metaphor, but I can't.
Well, no, it's like before you get pregnant. Okay. Oh, maybe I should take folic acid, or is it folate? I always get it wrong. What am I doing? I don't know. The doctor will tell me when I'm ready. It's like, I don't know. I feel like I wasn't interested in knowing about how to be pregnant until I wanted to be pregnant. And then I really cared. So I don't know. That's just me. That's just what I think.
But I think there's a difference, because we're not taught about menopause. When we're taught the women's reproductive cycle at school, it stops with pregnancy. It doesn't go anywhere beyond that. And actually, there've been a couple of really fantastic campaigns here in the UK. And they've got menopause will be included on the curriculum for sex education and biology, whatever, at school now, for both boys and girls, so they will learn about it. So the first time they hear the word won't be when they're in their 40s and thinking, and then it's all negative. They actually have heard something about it beforehand. And the other campaign, which has also been very, very powerful, is a group of women got together on Twitter, and they've created a poster which is Know Your Menopause. And they've got people taking selfies of themselves with this poster. They just print it out at home, picture of them with the poster, and they're putting it up in doctors' surgeries, because again, it's this ignorance, isn't it? People, as you said earlier, people don't know that these things might be related to hormonal changes.
Right.
Oh, that's great.
Well, and also just a picture of any of the three of us in a doctor's office saying, "No, you're menopause." People might go, "But you're so young." It's like, yeah,
Right.
it's not Granny knitting in the
Right.
rocking chair in the
No,
corner.
not at all.
Yeah.
Right.
So
And
that's great.
that's
I love
great.
that.
And thank goodness I loved your episode with Darcy, the hot flash count.
Flash count diary.
Flash count diary, isn't it? I just love that notion that, you know, postmenopausal whales become the leaders of their pods.
Yes.
And there's an evolutionary reason for both whales and humans to go through menopause, because we're more useful as leaders than breeders.
Mm-hmm.
Love that.
Yeah.
Love that.
Oh,
Yeah.
fantastic. That's brilliant.
Yeah.
I'd love to get that, you know, across to women so that they don't fear this very important next stage of life, which might last for a very long time.
Exactly.
Yes, yes.
Exactly.
Yeah. Great.
So what do you like about your time of life?
Giving zero fucks.
Yay.
Pardon my French.
You just made this podcast explicit.
I did.
We'll put an E on it, sister.
I honestly, I feel like I've changed my job because I just did not like it anymore. I said, this is not, life is way too short and getting shorter to deal with terrible people. And so I avoid terrible people. Like, I don't put up with them anymore. You know, it's like, oh, sorry, you're awful. Bye-bye now. I'm going to go. You're not part of my life anymore. So that, to me, that's a big part of like just being really clear on what you love and the people you love and the kind of people you love, and being with those people and living your life like that.
Agreed. And and just doing, like, realizing what you're good at, what you can be better at, what you want to do. You know, I think it's I think I got some clarity. You know, I think it's, instead of worrying about all the things that have to do with fertility and baby raising, and not that I'm done, but, you know, it just feels like more time to focus on me and not completely selfishly in that sort of like, oh, it's just me time. But it's more about, because I can be I can be better at being a mom. I can be a better wife. I can be a better, you know,
citizen,
all those things.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so what's one thing that you would like the listeners to remember?
It's not over, and there's lots of time, and you can have lots of energy to do all those things you ever wanted to do, your 12-year-old self or your, you know, 50-year-old self, whatever. But it takes looking inside. It takes thinking about it, takes getting clear, and then it takes being healthy. And you have to be healthy to get through this next part. We need you. We need you in this world doing the best you can. So please get healthy and get clear about what you want to do.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Magnificent Midlife Podcast. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe, share it, and maybe leave me a review on iTunes or wherever you're listening. You can find out more information about this episode in the show notes at magnificentmidlife.com. That's also where you'll find strategies, support, and resources to help make your midlife magnificent. There's a wellness program, courses, midlife mentoring to help make the most of your next chapter, and our online members club. Because life's just too short for plain biscuits. Help me change the world, one magnificent midlife woman at a time.